Hello and welcome to Ask USA Roundnet. This month we are unpacking a couple questions around the national team selection and the national series. My name is Ben Dantwitz. I am on the board of directors with USA Roundnet, here with another board member who happens to be my brother, Ezra Dantwitz. Thanks for joining today.
Sure, thanks for having me.
So I'm going to jump right into it, and if you've got more questions unanswered, you can ask them in the link below, and we'll answer them next month. So without further ado, the first question I wanted to cover was around how the national team selection process even came to be. So it actually kind of began last June 2023 when we were first planning nationals in the fall of 2023. We asked former members of Team USA, and we also sent a note out to a lot of highly ranked players to give us some cursory input on how many teams should qualify at the national championship last year, and then also what the process should be for 2024 Worlds, whether it should be a combination or one of the two between auto qualification and panel selection. So we got a lot of input from players in that initial wave. And then on top of that, coming into the fall, right before nationals, we asked people that were coming to nationals if they had thoughts and they wanted to participate more heavily in the process. So from a subset of those inputs, we had a lot of people give feedback on how they'd wanted the selection process to look, the timing of it, and who should be considered for selection. And from there, we gave players the option to opt in. And so after about 20 players in the fall last year opted in to give feedback, about 10 of them we had follow-on conversations on, where a lot of the process that you know and probably followed along with this spring came to be. Things around having to qualify at these qualifier events to be considered. That way it couldn't just be anybody could play on Team USA. You had to show up to the national series. And then similarly, we actually got input on how many people should be on the panel, what the timing of the panel should be, what kind of factors should go into considering the players. So I just want to be really transparent that a lot of the pieces and elements that came into making the selection process happen were built around not just some ideas and vision from the board of directors, but also a lot of players that were participating in the process. So wanted to tip my hat there. I know the other part of this then came into like how Team USA got selected this spring. And Ezra, I know you were really involved with that. So I'd love for you to speak to how that came together with the panel being selected and then how they formulated picking players for the national team.
Sure. Yeah, so taking over where you left off, the first step for us was the national series. We had 5 events across the country. We kind of picked those out based on different hosts that applied to host and making sure it was geographically diverse so that we had events in different parts of the country. We said the top 4 teams at each of those events, all those players would be eligible for selection. Rather than having a kind of win and you're in, we thought that making teams want to go compete at these events, give them a reason to actually travel and show their stuff, and then turn it over to a panel. So once we had the eligible athletes from that pool, we turned it over to a panel. I'll note like there were a few exceptions to that qualification rule. We had one person who's a US citizen living outside the States, and she'd asked, can I be eligible for Team USA? We said yes. We had a few women's divisions that didn't take place because there weren't enough teams. So we adjusted and said anyone who had registered for those events was eligible for selection. But after that, it really went to the panel. And so for the panel, we had put out a form asking people who are USAR members if they're interested in being on the panel. We asked a few questions. Firstly, where they're from. We asked for what their experience was with Roundnet, and we asked for what is the time that you've been like demonstrated non-biased judgment. We think that it's hard to remove bias entirely from the equation because the Roundnet community is so small and everyone's going to know a player and everyone's probably going to know a top player who's eligible. But the idea is that by having people from across the country, you're going to have representation from different groups and knowing different players, being closer to different players, and that balances out once you put together a panel of 9 people. So for both panels, we had our 3 returning Team USA coaches on them. So that's PJ Showalter, Joel Graham, Skylar Bowles. And then we added 6 additional people to each of those panels that were spaced across the country for a total of 9 people on the men's selection panel and 9 people on the women's selection panel. Over the last couple weeks of the national series, we went through and collected film from semifinals, finals, third place games as best we could for all of those teams and kind of condensed it as best we could so we could share it with the panel so that they were reviewing footage of all these players competing at the highest level in those national series matches. We also had a lot of help taking stats in those, notably from Kieran Rose in the community. I took some stats, Ben took some stats, but that was an awesome just resource for the panel to have not just the video, but also some numbers that they can go off of to give them an idea of who's actually performing well in each of these games. And from being in on all those conversations, I can say everyone on those panels took it very seriously. They had reviewed the film, they could speak to each player's abilities. When they didn't know, they were openly asking questions to get a better idea of what do you know about this player that maybe I'm missing. And those conversations were good. They were not always easy, but I think that's okay. That's part of the process where people are going to disagree and eventually come together to make a decision. And I think that's what we had for both the men's panel and the women's panel. And I'm really happy with the teams that we picked.
Yeah, you mentioned all the panelists took the job really seriously. Could you just, in recognizing all the hard work they put in, would you want to share who was on the men's and women's panels in addition to the coaches?
Sure, yeah. So I mentioned the three coaches already. And then for the men's panel, the other six panelists were Trevor Barbosa, Drew Banzinger, Matthew Burrows, David Gonzalez, Austin Rawlings, and Matt Spolaric. And on the women's side, it was Megan Bone, Samantha Barklow, Dylan James, Trevor Barbosa again, Trip Pearson, and Henry Pilliard.
Awesome. And then, yeah, like you mentioned, a lot of time went into that process, really end to end, where it was built kind of in tandem with the players, and then all the way through to the national series. That was built in tandem with the players' input. Organizations that I think I'll highlight had been running sanctioned events before. It was kind of one incentive for rewarding people that are running sanctioned events. And then, like you mentioned, the people that were stepping up and putting in the energy and time to help finalize these selections was really time consuming. I know one other hat tip. I might do it a lot, but for Rohill, helped edit quite a bit of the games. I know I supported him a bit there too, but he did quite a bit of that, I think, among other people that also chipped in. So yeah, all in all, we've been taking some feedback on how this process went. We'll continue to take feedback on it, and we're going to need to do it again in the future because we'll have a Team USA for Roundnet, hopefully as long as there's Roundnet. So very, very excited to continue doing this and building on it, improving it, and making it better next time. Anything else you wanted to share on the national team process, selection things?
No, I think the process was good. I think we'll find ways to improve it next time, whether it's just turning around quicker from that national series to actually selecting, or working on how we can better get videos condensed, get stats out so that we're not crunching that in the last minute. I think the panel discussion is a necessary thing, and the fact that it's hard and it's not always everyone agreeing on the same thing is good because it's the idea is that we want to have different opinions in the room.
Yeah, I think it would take you might not necessarily get one person to make the exact same list as the rosters. That's kind of the point, is it's bringing together a lot of ideas. On that note, the only other question in our mailbag today was about when do we get to see and buy Team USA jerseys. So I will just leave that in the description that those orders are now open. You got to make sure you just plug here as to make sure you look at the team roster, and if you want a particular jersey number and name to support your favorite player on Team USA, make sure you add that in when you're making your order. Otherwise, you can leave it blank and just get a general Team USA jersey. All those funds, if you buy a regular jersey or buy a specific player's jersey, will support them or just the overall team. And thanks for tuning into this. If you've got more questions next month, we will answer every single one you've got.